Hello, Blended in Black. I'm so glad you guys are here this morning. So, we have a really interesting conversation. Now, as you've seen, we have appealed to fathers' rights advocates. We've spoken up on behalf of biological mothers and step families, but we rarely get to hear the perspective of the child. Because the reason that we are all blended is because there's a child involved. Now, we have Blended in Black group member Shell on the line today. Hello, Shell.
Hello, hello.
Good. So she's been pretty vocal in this space, and she's explained so much and broken it down from the child's point of view. Because a lot of times, when us adults we enter into the throes of separation, divorce, remarriage, and trying to blend, it's hard to consider the feelings of this child who is like a sponge. So Shell has really shed a lot of light. Her parents divorced when she was 12 years old. Her father got remarried, and she did not have such a smooth transition. So Shell, now it was not only you, right? You had siblings.
Right, I have a younger brother. He's about 4 years younger than I am.
Okay, so 12 and 8-year old, so a girl and a boy. So do you remember anything positive about your parents' relationship?
Yes, my parents were married for about 15 years, and I'm the oldest, and so I was about 12. And in our state, you have to be separated for a year before you can officially file and start that process. So
Oh.
my dad left when I was about 11, and you have to be physically out of the house for at least a year. Um, So I felt like their relationship was mostly good. I mean, I know that they had times where they didn't get along, but I didn't, of course, understand the depth of that until they actually separated.
Did you Now you said like a lot of kids don't understand and they go through the phase of blaming themselves. Did you or your brother experience that? Like if I would have been better, mom and dad might have stayed together. Or did your parents do a good job at reassuring you that it was not your fault?
They pretty much told us it wasn't us, and they were arguing more, and it just felt like they didn't get along. I didn't really feel like it was me, and I don't think my brother did either.
Okay, good. What advice could you give to parents today that have these little eyes looking up at them for direction and reassurance? What do we need to tell these kids when we're getting ready to separate?
Well, I think what, and I was a little bit older versus my brother being younger, but I think the main thing is my parents did communicate that it wasn't that they didn't love each other or that they didn't love us. It was they just didn't think they worked well together anymore. And that we could still all be a family. We were still a family, that they just weren't going to live together. And my dad was very visible and always accessible. So
Mm-hmm.
even though he wasn't in the home, I could always call him, or he would come regularly. So he was my dad was in the Navy, so I was used to sometimes my dad wasn't home. So it wasn't too much of a stretch in our house for him to not be physically present. So
Oh,
it just
okay.
was about him being accessible. So that helped smooth some of that transition.
Okay, so it's not like you said, there was not a major like going back and forth. So how was it when because I know that you and I have discussed this previously. Somebody did get remarried, and things kind of hit a gray area from there, right?
Right, my dad got remarried. I would say relatively quickly. It was probably about a 2 year window from separation to remarriage.
Mm.
So that was very rapid for
Oh,
us.
did you guys have a chance to get to know the his wife before he got married?
We did interact with her quite a bit,
Okay.
and she had children as well.
Oh,
And yes, so
oh, same
she
age.
had the daughter and I are very very close in age, only like weeks apart, and her son is much younger than even my brother. So there's a big gap with the younger child.
So how was it when the four of you were just there at Dad's house kicking it?
Um, well, I got along with the daughter because we were the same age, we were similar interests, so that was okay. But the gap between um my stepbrother and my brother and us, it was a really big gap. So it was kind of a struggle including him in it.
To
But
connect with him, or just because you guys just didn't like him?
no, to connect with him. I mean, he
Okay,
wasn't unlikable. It was just he was just so much younger,
he was a baby compared to
right,
you guys.
compared to us, right?
So let's talk about the infamous stepmother. You guys out there know that I'm a stepmom, and the transition, no matter how some parents try to present it, if you're not on the same page as parents, it's gonna be a struggle for the kids because they have these serious loyalty binds, many times to the custodial parent, which is normally mom. So How was it with stepmom? Did you feel any sort of guilt to connect with her, or do you truly feel like she's just like an evil woman?
I don't think she's evil. I didn't feel guilt about connecting or not. And my mom was a custodial parent,
Hmm.
but the issue that I had with her, that we had with her, my brother and I, was that she wanted to be mom, and I felt like I had a mom already.
Of course.
And so, I felt like, well, because my dad got a new wife, that doesn't mean I need a new mom. If she would have been more comfortable just being another supportive adult in my village, then fine. But she really wanted to be mom, and I wanted to be called mom and everything, and I couldn't
Wait,
rock with
wait.
that.
So let's go back. So she asked you and your brother to call her mom?
She asked my dad to ask us to call her mom.
You like Mama, let's just say her name was Jane, like Mama Jane or something
No,
like that.
no, that was not an option because that's what we countered with. The request was mom, flat out,
Okay. Well, and what do you call your own mother?
mom, or ma or whatever. I
Okay.
call her ma or whatever, and so I was like, no, can we call her, like you say, Mama Jane, or and no,
So no.
that was unacceptable.
So
No.
when that happened, oh my God. So I'm a stepmother. I would never in a million years have them to do that. I asked the kids just call me Miss Naja, and I put the Miss in front of it because we're country Southern people, and just as a sign of deference and respect. Right, but I do know some people that call their step parents by their first name, which, however you guys want to do it in your household. Now, unless a child volunteers to call you mama or daddy, don't do that, y'all. Step parents, I'm talking to you. Us. Don't do that. So, Shell, what happened? Dad said, Jane wants you to call her mom.
Right. That was a conversation. It wasn't just a conversation, it was more or less an edict. You're gonna start doing that
Oh,
by the end of this weekend that you're visiting. And I don't think that I will. At this point I was probably closer to 16. And
whoa. Okay, so they got
so
married when the divorce happened at 12. They got married when you were 14.
I was about 14, right?
Okay,
So at this
so
point
2 years into
his
this, knowing this person, she's mom.
right. So this is a couple years in, right? And he was gently asking, even when they first got married, well, do you think you would ever call her mom? And we flat out said no. And his answer was, well, why? Because she's not my mom.
She's not my
That
mother.
she's not my mom. I would say, well, she didn't have her stomach cut open so that I could be born, and all these
Right.
other kind of things. And the fact of the matter was, it felt like erasing my
Mm,
legacy. This is what I came from. This is my backstory. That
right,
my
right.
parents were married, and so for you to ask me to call someone else mom, you're deleting who my mom is, and the fact that we were a family unit.
What in the world did your mother say when you went home as a 16-year-old, almost a young woman, and told her, Ma, Dad wants me to call Jane Ma? Did
Yeah,
your
that
mother
was
have a conversation with him or her?
not at first. Initially, I told her about it. I told her I didn't want to go there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was hostile, because I refused to comply. It just got to be
What about your
really.
brother? Did
Well, my
he?
brother was kind of following my lead.
Okay.
Just as the older sibling, he just always kind of following me. So it's kind of like whatever I was gonna do. He didn't
Right.
want to do it either, but if I would have went along with it, he probably would have. But
Right. Right.
so I just came home. I kind of told her about it, and I told her I didn't want to go, and she was like, "Well, maybe let it cool down. It might." Because my mother never kept us from seeing him. She wanted us to have that relationship, so that wasn't the issue. But the more it got to be an issue, the sharper her response became.
Right.
And so eventually she did not really confront my father, she confronted my stepmother.
Ooh. Uh-oh. Did you now was this like a I'm gonna come over here and meet you, or a phone call confrontation?
It was a phone call.
What is she? You were there. Of course you heard it, because we kids hear everything. I was so nosy. I was such a nosy child. How did
Yeah,
it
it was
go?
easy to hear. So,
Oh, it was easy. I know what that
I
means.
mean, she had the door closed, but I mean, it wasn't that hard. She essentially told her that we were a family, and that she was our mother, and that nothing could change that, and she needed to stop trying to rewrite history.
Mm. I wonder what your stepmother's response was when you guys went back. Did she kill that whole mom talk?
It did get killed because it clearly wasn't going to happen.
No.
It just wasn't going to. It became not worth the battle. To me, it wasn't a hill she should have chosen to die on. And being an adult now, I feel even more so. Like, I
Right.
understand they were trying to make a family unit out with the kids that they had in their home because
Hmm.
they call my dad, and that's fine if that's what works for them. But I was not ashamed to be acknowledged as a child from a previous marriage. That did not bother me. But I was an
Okay.
older child. I understand younger children that might be a little squirrely, but not for me because my
Right.
my parents were married. And I was with them married for the majority of my childhood as far as I was concerned. So,
Right. Right.
um,
So what? How was your relationship? I guess when the tension started to happen, since you and her daughter were the same age, did you find yourself at odds with this young lady?
yes,
Mm.
because she felt like I was attacking her mom or that I just hated her mom or you won't let my mom love you. She just wants to love you. I'm like, I don't need her to love me. Like, I'm good. It's like, I think she doesn't. I didn't need an extra parent, and so it was an uncomfortable, and it never really smoothed over between us. It's better, but it never. That was a big snag for my relationship with her.
Mm. Now,
Yeah.
how did that affect relationship with dad then? Because his wife, his stepchildren, whom he spends more time with, I assume, than you and your brother, just naturally because he was in the household with them. How did that affect relationship with dad?
We became very, I would say, estranged to the point, to as much as I guess we could have been, because again, my mom was very adamant. You're gonna go over there. You're gonna spend time. But around that time is when she told me, well, I don't. You don't have to go if it makes you uncomfortable. So I probably didn't go to visit with him for probably about a year. Um,
Oh my God! Did he call or did he just say, "Hey, you're a young lady. You'll be back if you need to. The door's open." Or was he upset?
well, he made attempts to, well, yeah, he made attempts to see me and call, but I just wasn't interested. So my mom actually got us into a counseling session. My dad
Wow.
and me.
So
Yeah.
your mother actually, this is rare because we don't really hear of. I'm sorry. I wish this was not the case, but we really don't hear of mothers almost facilitating this relationship between their children and their ex-husbands or their children's father. We don't really hear this, so I gotta commend your mom. How did your mom? And we have a lot of biological mothers that may be experiencing divorce, separation, or they're just not with their child's father. Can you? How did your mom manage to be so cool about all this? What did she do? How?
Well, and I think, to be honest, I really see my mom a lot differently. I guess as an adult and even as a child. I mean, my mom did not have a relationship with her biological father because he died when she was young, and so she was raised by the person I call my grandfather is not her biological father, and
Okay.
she always felt a little different because of that. And to her, her biological father would have just been amazing if he just would have had, if she would have had him. So to
Yeah.
her, um, our relationship with our dad was of utmost importance to her. It was
Okay.
just that's never something she wanted sacrificed. It doesn't matter how angry I got with him or what kind of drama we had. Her thing was that's your dad. That's always your dad. I was a daddy's girl the whole time, and she's like, that's always your dad, and you need to maintain that with him because it could have been worse. She used to say that to me. It could have been worse. You could have had somebody worse than him.
Right.
And to her, worse was her dad being deceased. Was worse. And
Okay.
so to her, she's like, you got to be. So that's why she really pushed it. And like I said, she got us into a counseling session, and my dad agreed to it because it's what he wanted. And when we got in there, he admitted, I made error here. I should not have pushed this issue. I didn't think about how you would feel. Because as an adult, I guess he just was trying to manage what was in his face every day. And
Right.
that's his wife and the kids in his home. But we were kind of being pushed to the side for that. And that was what we felt.
Right.
That
Right.
I got abandoned, I got replaced. You got new kids.
Wow, he really had two kids like one the same age, so I could see how your mind could formulate that. Now, going back a little bit, I know that you told me in a previous conversation off air, you and I were talking about the wedding day, because that was something that was very important for me to know about. My stepchildren were not allowed to attend our wedding. Not that they were not wanted, they were not allowed. In similar case with your dad, my husband would be, away on deployment. So it's not like they were accustomed to him being in the home, even when he was married to their mother. And, divorce happened and we had a different experience. We don't have the type of mother like your mom that facilitated that. And so when it came to including them, it became increasingly difficult because we were relegated to phone calls and visits whenever he would go to town, which, as when separation and anger happens, it started to decrease because we would go to town, the kids wouldn't be brought to their drop-off spot. Or they would be told they're here and they're not there. And, contempt charges, court, and, court just makes things even worse. Oh my gosh, yes, it definitely turns families that could have almost worked it out into your mortal enemies now. Like you're enemies. And so for a while we dealt with that. But I remember you telling me, well, I was in my dad's wedding, but you were 14. But your brother, who at the time was 10, he decided not to go. And I remember saying, well, Shell, now this sounds like a case of alienation, not having known what you just told me about your mom. So how in the world could a 10-year-old have made the decision that he's just not going to go to daddy's wedding?
Well, and that's the thing. We were both, supposed to be in it. I was a junior bridesmaid. He was going to be junior groomsman, tuxes and dresses bought and all that. It wasn't until the week of that he decided he didn't want to do it. I think neither one of us really wanted him to get remarried. I mean, I was upfront about that. I was okay with them being divorced if that's what they wanted to do, but I felt like he was getting married very quickly. And I guess my brother took control in the way he could, which was just outright refusal. I mean, refusing to try on the tux, refusing to participate in the practice,
Oh,
and so
wow.
he didn't want to go. And
Poor
so
baby.
my mom just allowed him to not go. I still went because I was okay with it. My dad wanted me there, so I went. But he didn't want to go, and I guess I don't know if he would have made a scene or not, but he was kind of already making one. So
Right.
I don't know if it would have been further. So my mom just told him he didn't have to. She just didn't press it. And my dad was, in my opinion, more upset with my brother. I don't think he really saw my mom as being the catalyst because I went. If I also pulled out, then I think that would have looked more like it was my mom.
Right. Oh my God. So looking back, because you were only 14 at the time, is there a way that your dad could have finessed it or presented it to your brother in such a way like, look, man, I really want you to be there. Can you do this for me? I know you're upset right now. Is there something that your dad could have done to help the situation?
Looking back, I don't think so. I think that's just where my brother was. He had a really hard time. Like, where I was okay with them being divorced, he was not. He had a harder time with them being separated and divorced. So I think for both of us, I mean, and to be honest, even even now as an adult, like in my mind, if my parents got back together, that would be amazing. Even still.
I often hear that kids want their parents to be together. Like this is a natural thing. The people that brought you into the world, whose hormones mixed to bring you here, it's natural to want them together. Now, let's reverting back again. If you can remember this 12-year-old / 14-year-old / 16-year-old mind of yours, what would have been an appropriate time for dad and mom to remarry? Like, what's the time frame that you would have, in your mind, if you can think back to being a young girl, because we have a lot of parents here whose kids are 12, 14, 16, 8, So if you could just go back and think to where your headspace was all those years ago, what would have been an appropriate time, or how could dad and mom how could they have presented it to where it would have been a little easier? Could it have been 5 years, 3 years?
I think probably somewhere around the 3 to 4 year mark would have been better, because like my mom, I feel like has waited almost too long because my mom is still not remarried.
Okay. How long have they been divorced?
It's been almost 20 years. This year is 20 years.
20. So let me ask you that. Wait a minute. Wait. So did she ever have a boyfriend?
I'm going to be perfectly honest. If she had one, I didn't know anything
Y'all didn't know.
about
You didn't know. You did not
uh,
know.
I met one guy sometime when I was in college, which at that point they'd have been separated probably 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
I met one guy, and I know that was because they had dated for a while. And my mom saw it as there was so much upheaval with my dad getting remarried that she wasn't about to do it on the other end. Home was safe, home was comfortable, a respite, and she wasn't going to bring that home,
Ooh,
so.
we. Do you think that made you the fact that dad had somebody and mom was, I don't know if you guys perceived her as lonely, but mom was alone. Did that make you have a certain level of sympathy for mom?
I really was grateful that she was willing to sacrifice, but I felt like the sacrifice was a bit high. I don't now. I really wish she had not sacrificed herself to the degree that she did.
I know,
Um,
because you guys are adults out of the house, a family of your
right,
own, and
right,
mom has made, you know what, I'm not going to say an ultimate sacrifice because, mama can always get her groove back. So
right.
we're not
Oh
counting
yeah,
her.
and I want her to. That's the thing. I'm like, please, I want her to. But it was. I'm appreciative because my brother had such a hard time. He really, really did more than I did.
Hmm.
It would have been too much. And I hate that she
Probably,
had to.
yeah.
Yeah, it would have. And not to say that my dad didn't try to step in and because my dad did parent, but
Hmm.
it's still my mom was getting the brunt of it, just being the custodial parent.
Right.
So I wish she could have, but she just didn't. But that didn't help things be smooth because hey, the only other people at this house is whatever we call between the three of us. There's
Right.
not
And you're
another
like, look,
person.
this is still your home. This is your safe space. I know you go to your dad's
Right.
house and feel like a visitor, but this is your home. Wow.
And that was a big thing. We did feel like a visitor at my dad's house. There was nothing there that was ours. Nothing.
No room, no
Not a
comforter.
room. We had a bunk bed in our room. My brother did not have a bed to sleep in. He slept on like the pull-out sofa. It
Okay.
wasn't our house.
They didn't have this.
No,
They didn't have the space. So since there was a girl there, you slept in the bunk bed in her room.
correct.
Okay, so you guys shared a room, and then your brother and the other younger son, I guess they shared a space.
The younger son had a room to himself, and my brother used like the bonus room uh space.
Okay, you guys, you hear that? Non-custodial parents and step parents, make a space that is these children's very own. Make them feel like don't let them feel like they're a visitor, and that's a struggle sometimes if the kids are there every other weekend or if you're visiting them from out of state. You got to figure it out. How can we make this theirs? And I think children would appreciate the effort. Like if you would have seen your dad and your stepmother do something to show you this is your space, or even tell you that, I'm sure that would have made all the difference in the world.
Right. They have something there that was ours or that stayed there that was ours.
Right.
Because there was just nothing there that was just ours. Whatever was ours was in this bag. Is what we brought with us and it's going back with us.
Mm.
The only proof that we possibly existed was we did take family photos with them a few times, so we were in some family photos.
Uh-huh.
But that was the only proof that we existed was the family photos.
So
So.
how was it growing up? You looking at, I mean, luckily back then we didn't have Instagram, Facebook, when you were enduring this. But I think about my stepkids now, 6 years old and 12, and being exposed to social media and seeing me on their dad's page and things that we do. And, I was like, I think about that on the occasion, like, wow. I hate number one that they cannot be here with us, and it's a legal thing. It's not that they're not wanted or they're not needed, but it's literally the way the decree is set up. Um, should you think parents should take more of a responsibility in what they share now that we are in the age of technology?
I definitely think so. It bothered me a lot that my dad and my stepmom and that whole them over there, as I would call it sometimes, honestly, as a
Right.
teenager, that they had a lot more than we did. My dad made great money. My stepmom made good money, and they just had a lot more opportunities. And my stepsister got a car as soon as she turned 16 and got a license. I mean, I didn't. It was impossible. And with us being the same age, that was very uncomfortable. I was very angry.
So
That
why
she
did
got
they
a car
not?
right away.
Now, and I know, I'm sure that, well, you don't know, like, if her mother actually bought it, but I'm sure you were assuming, oh, wow, my dad helped do that. So, I guess this is a matter of communication. What could have happened for you to have felt equal? Because you guys were the same age. Why does she have a car and a license and you don't? But I need to know. Please tell me this parents gave you an explanation because you deserved that.
The
No.
explanation that I got from my dad was that it was a disagreement between him and my mom in terms of agreeing on what car to choose and that kind of thing. That's partially accurate, not 100%. And to be fair, to be honest, my mom kept me out of 95% of the details. It just what most of the stuff going on, I didn't know up from down with a lot of that stuff. But the car thing, I got really angry about. So
Right. Right.
she kind of brought me into that a little bit more. And no, we did disagree, but he's being unreasonable. Showed me what they had because some of it was written up. So I was like, no, I can understand why you wouldn't want to agree to that. I felt like he made it purposefully difficult, but at least wanted to say, well, I tried to buy you a car or whatever, kind of.
Okay.
So,
Now, what about paying for college and for needs during school? Was that covered in the child support, or did you call dad for certain
now,
things and mom for certain things?
as soon as I turned 18, my dad went to court and got me taken off the order. I know that happened as soon as I turned 18. I turned 18 on the 1st, and he filed the paper on the 4th. And even though my mom argued, that I was a full-time student, my dad was able to prove I had a full scholarship, which was true. And so I was taken off the child support order. So it was just my brother being considered in the dollar amount, and so the dollar amount was reduced.
How did that make you feel?
Well, I figured my dad would do it. I mean, my dad he was sending a substantial amount of money, but he made a lot of money. And so he did help me in other ways. I could call him and say I had a need, and he would probably, meet my need. And I got put on his phone plan eventually, those kind of things. So he did still assist. And to be fair, I didn't need a lot of assistance because I had a scholarship. But,
Right, right. So it's not like they had to pay fork over thousands for tuition. And so it was just
right.
your brother. Was your mother dependent on the money to keep the household afloat?
Yes and no. I mean,
So what I always like to know, when child support ends, what do moms do? Because I know sometimes you can't help but to be dependent on it if you're expecting an extra $1,000 because there's 2 extra mouths to feed. I get it. But what happens when it's cut off?
well, and that's what I was going to say. To be fair, I understand to some extent that child support is supposed to be about helping maintain quality of life, essentially, especially if
Right.
y'all were married in the house together.
Right.
But my mom definitely, we scaled back our lifestyle. I mean, we did not keep it where it was when my dad lived there because the child support wasn't literally enough to do that. I mean, it
Right.
was a lot, but my mom did not make a lot of money, so we scaled back. So things like no cable or not taking vacations and things like that definitely got, all that got kind of nixed. So my mom, in my opinion, slowly scaled back her lifestyle for the day that the child support was going to disappear.
What would have happened, like, once again, we're talking about vacations, and I know you mentioned you guys actually being included in family pictures, as you should have been. So what about vacations? Did you go on vacations with your father and and the other members of your family?
I did not. They did take a trip, but they did not attempt one until I was in college. So he called me and asked me if I could come, told me he'd fly me down and all that, but I just couldn't, not when they were going. And
What about your brother?
my brother also did not go. I felt like that was kind of intentional, though. I mean, he did not try to do one until we were both over 18. and at that point, not just over 18, but unlikely to actually want to go. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, we went to Disney when we were, and I went to Disney as a child when my parents were still together. We went twice. So,
You
but my
have those
step
memories.
right, but my step siblings had never been.
Okay,
So
okay.
I think he maybe went with them. We've gone and but see now and kind of we were talking about it in the Blended and Black group this morning about co grandparenting.
Oh, yes, Lord. It doesn't stop
Uh,
at 18. A lot of
and
people get so excited. I can't wait till 18. Y'all, it does not stop at 18 because you're going to have to see your co-parent, your ex at your daughter, and when your daughter has a baby and you're going to be grandparents, when she gets married, you're going to have to keep seeing these people. So we may as well start to figure out how to mend, not
right,
even
you need
blend.
to
Let's
start
just
trying to fix
mend.
it.
Fix this.
Exactly, and that's what. And I have two children, and when my first child was born, both my parents were there,
Mm.
and I mean, and they've been at kindergarten graduation together and all the and they are cordial enough. where it's no sparks flying or
You
anything
would
like
think after all the,
that.
so what about step grandma? Does she come to these events?
No. That
Really?
is not that has not been at my directive. I think it's just assumed that I would rather she not be there. Um, it
Hmm.
would probably make it a little squirrely, but I have not because my husband, his father is also remarried. He has a step parent as well,
Mm-hmm.
but his dad got remarried when he was an adult. Like it's only been in the last maybe 5 years. So she comes to stuff. It's fine, no problem. But she knows she's not his mom
Right.
because we've had this bad history. And even now, she wants to be grandma, and I'm like, "Oh, you do." It feels like mom 2.0. It feels like you're trying to insert yourself again
Right.
as this figure that you aren't. And my kids are confused.
So they're
We're having
like,
problems.
so do you? What do your kids call her, or do they have a relationship with her?
Um, well, they don't really have a relationship with her. They recognize my father as granddaddy, and so they will say, "Well, it's a woman who lives at granddaddy's house." I'm like, yeah.
Ah, we looked at my grandfather's his wife. I don't even know if they're really married, but we looked at her like that too. We just called her Miss Ann because that was just like we had a grandmother. And this way, and looking back, I'm an adult now and I am a stepmother, and so the feeling of isolation can get very strong because this is your husband. This is literally the most important person to you. His children are his top priority, however. And so you're like, it feels very odd not to be able to share in one another's top priorities. And so just being isolated and not being allowed and wanting to do certain things and it not be accepted from children, it's like, it's heartbreaking at first, but then you have no choice but to get over it because you're not going to be depressed about it. And a really good stepmother, step grandmother still allows her husband to go and see his children, even if they don't. And she still facilitates that relationship. Because I know a lot of men will say, well, my kids don't accept you, I'm not going to go. No, no, no. Go ahead and go. Look, go ahead and go. That those are your children. I'm not welcome. Go ahead and go. And you don't have to necessarily tell a person they're not welcome for them to not feel welcome. Like you said, if she came, like you could say that to me, if she came to your baby's school activity, I'm sure she wouldn't be welcome with open arms. And don't nobody want to deal with that. You know, ain't no
Well,
way. Don't
I
nobody
can
want to deal with that.
understand that.
Like,
I
I'm not gonna
really
go and
do.
force myself to be at my stepkid's event, and like, why would I choose to go somewhere and suffer the abuse when I'm only trying? I'm taking off work and I'm doing something for your little ungrateful behind. Not you, but and not even them because that hasn't come up yet. But this is the way
No,
that
I understand. I
right.
understand, and that's the thing. I don't feel any kind of way about it. If she wanted to be there, that's fine. And
Well,
like
let
I
me
said,
ask
at
you
this
this. Have
point,
you
it don't
invited
even
her? Have you called her? Because I know if you were to invite her, she'd be there now. She'd be there 20 minutes early, an hour early. Because she would be, like, the longing that happens in a step parent that's not been accepted in their heart, it's like this unquenchable thing. And the only person that can quench it is not her husband. It's you guys. So, if you were to call her and offer, oh my God. And this is me coming from my own personal experience. That would be freaking music to her ears. You would literally have an extra babysitter, an extra set of extra Christmas gifts, because she'll want to overcompensate for all those years that she didn't get to do it with you guys. Not because she couldn't, she just didn't see the place. And honestly, it would be difficult for me to convince my husband, hey, let's buy so and so a car when it's coming out of our household money and they're not going to be appreciative. It would be a little bit difficult for me to do that. But
It's not that I would. Well, and I'll counter that as a child. It's not
uh-huh.
that I wouldn't have appreciated it. The issue is I'm not asking it of you as the stepmother. I'm asking it of my father. That's my parent.
Right.
It's my parents' responsibility, to give me a privilege or to not, because I do see a car as a privilege. But I had earned the privilege. I had good grades, a lot of that. So yes, I had earned the privilege.
Now let me
My
counter
father
that with
believed I had
this.
earned it.
Let me counter that with this. When your father got remarried, he married into another household. And so, I just like you're married now, right? Right. So think about how you would feel if $10,000 was going to come out of your household, was going to leave it for your husband's children. I don't think your husband has other children, but you guys is right. Okay, so if there was kids that you didn't talk to that were not necessarily welcome and warm, pseudo disrespectful, but not outright. You know, would you want to send $10,000 over there? It would kind of be a tough sell. You probably do it just because you're like, I gotta be a godly person, but you know, that was still household money. And I'm playing devil's advocate here because I see both sides of the fence. I feel like this stepmother, she made a categorical mistake by throwing the mom word in your face. But that should not have been the end all be all. Like, okay, so we can't have a relationship ever again now because you made a mistake when I was 16. And mind you, ain't no handbook. I'm writing one now for those of you guys that are listening, but you know, there's no handbook on how to approach this stuff. What would
Well,
you if
let me offer this then to that.
uh-huh.
I agree that one error, no, even a big one like that, doesn't have to be the nail in the coffin.
Right.
What made it the nail in the coffin was not walking it back or apologizing for it.
Not
There's never
acknowledging.
been a point. There's never been a point where she said, "I was asking too much of you. I didn't consider your feelings. I let my feelings get in the way of yours." None of that has happened. It's only been in the last couple of months that even my father acknowledged that was an error. I should have never done that.
Really?
I
And this we're
understand.
talking
Yeah,
tens multiple double digit years ago. So do you guys hear that? You one thing that we always teach is if you think another person's pain is stupid, invalid, pointless, you need to acknowledge it because it's their experience, it's their journey. Don't go on like nothing ever happened because these people, you know, she planted a seed right there of mistrust for you and your brother. It was a seed of mistrust. She overstepped a boundary, but it was never acknowledged. So one little conversation, look, you know, I went too far with that girl. I was new. I did not know what I was doing, and I was wrong. So can you find a way to accept my apology? Now, would that not be where could if something like that were to happen? Where could we go from there?
if she was willing to come and have that conversation with me, I would be willing to start fresh.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
that and I can say that easily because as an adult, I mean, I see her or I don't. You know, it's not as a child, but I
right,
can, you know what I mean. But I could start fresh with her. And again, we're in a cordial position, but there's still an air of I remember when you didn't like me. You know that I
yeah,
definitely feel that off of her. You know,
right,
and I can
right.
understand that.
Hmm.
But it's particular things, and every situation is different. And that handbook, that's going to be
Girl,
interesting to see
so
what that how that turns out. Yeah.
we have a few more minutes, so we got to wrap up. But can you just give us some? I like to end every segment with real talk. So I need you to say something to these specifically. First to the fathers that are getting remarried. Can you just, from a 12-year-old, 14-year-old, and 16-year-old perspective, because a lot of their children are around this age now, just start talking and please, as if you were speaking to your dad and all the dads out there, let them hear it. Let them have it.
Okay. So if I'm 12 and you're getting remarried, I was probably the center of your world for a long time. Um, I was daddy's girl. It was me. My mom could have been invisible, and I'd have been fine. So dad leaving was already difficult to deal with, and now you are acquiring a new woman that I don't really know very well. Hopefully, you made sure that I know her well. But maybe I do and maybe I don't. But what I want to be sure of is that my status and my value in your world has not wavered. That will be my top concern. It's not that you can't have a wife. I want you to be happy. A wife can do for you as a daughter I could never do. But I just want to make sure that I still am that important woman or female figure in your world as the daughter. That was my biggest concern. I felt like I went from being daddy's girl to being a blip on the radar. And it was a long time before I realized that I was never a blip on the radar and that he was in a lot of pain because of all that had transpired. And a lot of what he was doing was out of guilt. And that's something I didn't understand because he wasn't willing to tell me that until I was a lot older. So to some degree, being open, and that's something to me in the black community, we have an issue with. Being willing to be open with our feelings, not just saying I feel sad or I feel whatever, but also acknowledging I may have made a mistake or I don't want to lose you in my world either. And that would have maybe mended it or at least kept it where I'm constantly considering his feelings because I was very wrapped up in mine as a child. I was really only seeing it from my perspective, which as a young child, I mean, even as a teenager, there's only so much I can understand about being an adult. So for me, it was just me, and a feeling of abandonment and feeling that, and also consider dads that you being that first man in her life, that's going to impact how she interacts with other men. And you hear that all the time, and I didn't even realize how I was applying it in relationships I was with. I felt like I had to prove to that man that I was worth not abandoning.
Ooh.
That's what I had to do. And my husband was the first man in my world when I was dating that didn't need me for anything and wanted me anyway. Every other man, I had the car, I had the job, I had the apartment, I had the money. I had something of value, and that's why he needed me. And he had to need me. But my husband didn't need me for anything. He was self-sufficient. And so that's something I carried on. So if I always wonder what it would have been like if I never questioned my value. And my dad's relationship with me made me question it for a large window when I was a teenager, navigating dating for the first time and not having my dad to meet the guy at the door. You know, I was trying to navigate that. So for me, if I had to tell dad something, especially you dealing with a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl who's maybe had you in her world for a long time, and now you're not there, and she's got to fight for your attention with somebody else, she's having a hard time with that. Make time for her, just her, you and her, so that she knows she still holds that place.
Whew. Okay. So I don't really think I even need to follow that up with anything blended in black. We have a really good perspective, and I hope you guys got something from that because I did too. So this is Naja, your founder of Blended in Black. Thank you so much, Shell, for your time. So this is Naja, everybody, and I hope you guys enjoy this. Please don't forget to sign up to the newsletter. Make sure you leave any questions or comments. Shell will be seeing all of them. So if you have direct questions for her, once I post the blog, please respond there. And we have created an anonymous account for her, so she will be able to respond to all of you guys. So, all right, Blending in Black signing out. And remember, let's mend and blend, people. All right? Okay.
Blended in black, yeah, yeah, yeah. We're blended in black.